Welcome to Matters of Faith. I'm Christiana Bakker, and I have a question for you. What do torpedoes, surgical instruments, archers, observatories, and fountain pens have in common? Were Leonardo da Vinci's flight ideas original? Well, we'll find the answers to all those questions and more today in our program. Our topic is the Muslim heritage in our world. And we're in London to speak to Professor Al Hassani, who's the editor-in-chief, in fact, of a book called The Muslim Heritage and 1001 Inventions. Professor Al Hassani, thank you and welcome to our program, Matters of Faith.
Thank you.
Very nice to be speaking to you, and we'll look forward to hearing all about these 1001 inventions. Could you introduce yourself a little bit in your own words, please?
Yes, well, thanks for this opportunity to have a chat with you and with the respectable audience. My name is Salim Al Hassani. I am a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Manchester, but I'm now called emeritus professor because I just took early retirement so that I am devoting my life and time to uncovering this fascinating hidden treasure, which is called the Muslim heritage. Originally I was born in Baghdad. My father is from Medina, my wife is from Syria, and I'm saying that from Syria because many people think of a great character called Juha or Hoja Mullah Nasruddin, when he's a sort of a satire, satiric figure who is sometimes he makes jokes but they have meanings, and when he was asked, where do you come from, he said, I'm not married yet. So perhaps I'm now more Syrian than, but I've been here in the UK for 50 years, where I did most of my studies and professional work. I've worked in Germany and Arab world as well. 1001 Inventions is actually not literally 1001 Inventions. This is a name which was given by our marketing advisors to the kind of work we are doing. It is chosen to be in contrast to the 1001 Nights, because a lot of people, when they tell them about Muslim or Arab, they would immediately think of Sinbad the Sailor, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp and the Genie, and possibly with some belly dancing. Yes. You know, and this is incredible. You know, although the story of 1001 Nights is a nice piece of literature, but it has dominated the background mind of a lot of people in the West, and we thought we'd give them a shock treatment and tell them about 1001 inventions that have come to us through the Muslim heritage, and hence the story of this project.
I mean, if we ask the average person on the street who invented spectacles, cameras and fountain pens, perhaps they wouldn't know. Now, what is the reason for this ignorance, yes, Professor Al Hassani?
Well, there is a huge gap in the educational curricula in the UK. But when we looked at European and American curriculum, which are the syllabus of studies of mathematics, chemistry, biology, physics, so on, we find that there is about 1,000 years missing, which is an amnesia. There is a big jump from the Greek and Roman on the one side to what we call the European Renaissance. So there's more than 1,000 years. Sometimes it's called the Dark Ages. Sometimes it's called the Medieval Age. That is unfortunately missing.
Why?
Well, the reason why is a bit complicated, but I think that first of all, people normally tend to look at their own cultures and their own. There was a problem between anything religious and scientific in Europe. The church had a problem with this newly rising Renaissance science and so on. And at the same time, there was the Crusades, so that if there was a confusion, those great people like Copernicus and great scientists who had adopted ideas that may have been found to be conflicting with the church, they didn't want to be seen as having read Arabic and and transferred some of their knowledge from, acquired their knowledge from Arabic sources. So you'll find that...
Because of the Crusades?
Well, Crusades and the problem between religion and science in Europe, because the Church had adopted that there's a hostility. And unfortunately, until now, we are suffering from that. So the fact that people in the West, although when they wanted to know about the Greeks and what the Greeks have done, they had to learn Arabic because there was nothing left in the Greeks. If you want to find out anything what Galen has said or Ptolemy, you can't find Greek manuscripts. So the historians had to read Arabic first, because the Arabs at the time have translated the Greeks' work and preserved it. And that's why when we say Muslim heritage, what we mean by that is like, if you imagine yourself, there is a train moving in time on rails. And this train is, when it arrived in Europe, in Florence, Paris, and Berlin, and London, it arrived carrying, driven by Muslim drivers, carrying Muslim passengers, but also non-Muslim, great scholars, non-Muslim scholars who were working very closely with Muslim scientists and scholars. But also the train carried freight, and this freight had enormous amount of inventions and knowledge that came not only from the Muslims and the Arabs and the Persians, but also came from before the Muslim civilization. It came from India, from China, from ancient Egypt, Assyrians, and so on.
Mention some examples.
Yeah, so I'll give you some examples. Many people, when they look at the modern numerals, we call them Arabic numerals, the 1, 2, 3, 4, which we write from left to right. But when we do calculations, any mathematical calculations and sums, what do? We start from the right to left, which is the Arabic way. Right. Now that, when it came to Europe, it was called Arabic numerals. They abandoned the Latin numerals because you couldn't possibly do any sums, you couldn't do any equations. If Europe stayed with Latin numerals, it would have not had any advances in any industry. So the problem is this.
Come from India?
So the Arabs at the time, they used to call it Indian numerals. The Arabs were honest people. The Muslim scholars never deny any nation, any culture, their contribution. They were always very meticulous and very careful about recognizing their sources and references. Now, because they were taken from the Arabs by the Europeans, so Europeans called it Arabic numerals. But the Arabs of the time called their freight in the train as Indian numerals. But of course it has changed, because what the Muslims have done, in the east part of the Muslim world, they maintained what is now still used, but it's very much like Indian Persian in the way they write their numerals. But from North Africa, South Spain, South Italy and Spain and so on, it's the ones that we have. They're also called, but they have changed them so that makes it easy to recognize. Like 1 referring to 1 angle, 2 has 2 angles, 3 angles, 4 angles, 5 angles. Yes. It was very simple. Yeah. They also have managed to modify the use of 0. Now 0 was known by the Babylonians. The Indians knew the 0 and so on. But to use the 0 as a decimal was a Muslim method, and so on. So this unfortunately, this gap in knowledge, of course some conspiracy theory says, well, it was deliberate. People did not want to have their own children and their own nation to know about what the Muslims have done and so on. And they just wanted to concentrate on European superiority, and particularly British superiority or German superiority or the American superiority. And they could be right in one way and be worried about it, because the problem of cultural superiority could be misused. And the example to give is what happened to the Red Indians in the United States. The Red Indians were annihilated in the name of the cultural superiority, because they were considered to be a low culture, and they were effectively defeated. Now those who believe in conspiracy theory would say, well, that was the reason why that 1,000 years have been obliterated and airbrushed from history. Now I have a slightly different view, which I have explained. I think that there is a mixture of all sorts of things. There was a need to concentrate on the Industrial Revolution. There was a need to concentrate on a new rising of science. That had to become secular, because the then dominating religion at the time had adopted certain ideas which could not be accepted by the scientists and the engineers and the industrialists at the time. And that caused a problem. And since when you bring in the word Islam or Muslim heritage, it could confuse the whole issue and make them belong to sort of a Muslim camp rather than a European camp. And Europe wanted to strip itself from its recent history of darkness, of the plague, of the ignorance and so on, and wanted to rise with a fresh, and hence they were a bit jaundiced and afraid of touching that. I think this is a much more reconciliatory approach. In any case, what we should do now, because we're living in a different world,
Yeah.
we are living in a world that is converging and we're a global world. And what we would like to see is that we look at this 1,000 years amnesia and uncover it and fill it with authentic, academically reviewed, scrutinized, correct, truthful information, so that where there is sort of truth, it has to come out. When Isaac Newton said a fantastic sentence, and this sentence is on the £2 coin at the edge of every £2 coin we have in the UK. It says, we stand on the shoulders of others, giants, sorry, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, of course, when Isaac Newton has said that, whom did he mean?
Yes, of course.
He was standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
So if one really dig deep and find out who before Isaac Newton, you will not go very far before you discover the great Muslim giants which he thinks of. Like you mentioned something about the spectacles. And, now, of course, Isaac Newton worked a lot on light and reflection and so on. Yeah, of course, he must have referred to Ibn al-Haytham. 1,000 years ago, this man has revolutionized the way people used to think that the way they see. Instead of, he said that instead of the eyes emitting rays to the object which we see, it's the other way around. It's light that comes to the object and it's reflected from the object. And he developed experiments to prove that. And his famous experiment is the camera, which we call camera today, and that means the dark room. He's in a dark room, he puts a small little pinhole on one side, and the light goes through this pinhole, and the picture outside that dark room, the camera, comes out opposite the pinhole, inverted picture of the outside. So, and in fact, Ibn al-Haytham even had dared to explain why is the picture is upside down instead of like what we see, our eyes. He says our eyes is like the camera. But he says that it must be the brain that actually converts it. And he was right. 1,000 years after him, now people know it is the brain recalculates the image and converts it upside down.
Now, you categorized your 1,000 Inventions book into several categories. Can you take us through the categories?
Yes,
Give us an example.
The idea here is that this is not a book about history. We are not doing history and so on. What we're saying is this: let us audit the objects and devices and things that affect our life, like our daily life. So we have homes. We go out of home. We go to work. We go in town. We go to markets. We go to school or university. We go to hospitals. Or we look at the earth, we travel around earth, and we look at the sky. So these are the various zones. So if you take the home, for instance, you wake up in the morning and you use a toothbrush, you use toothpaste, you use soap. These are all Muslim inventions, right? And then you walk down, and then you have a newspaper put through your door, and you open the newspaper. And who brought the paper to Europe? Paper was originally discovered in China. It came on that train.
I see.
But the Muslims have refined it. They made it out of pulp. They made it into mass production. So we then have thousands and thousands of books people can... Then the idea of using these pictures that we mentioned about Hassan ibn al-Haytham, the camera that uses pictures. And then, of course, if you can't read, then you use your spectacles. But then if you're a musical person, you switch the music on to hear something. And then what's this music? How is the music written? Music is written using language. What is the language of the music? We call it, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Now this is, look at the resemblance. of Arabic alphabets. It's Dal, Ra, Mim, Fa, Sad,
that's
Lam,
amazing.
Jim.
Yeah.
And then you look at some of the instruments, you know, the lute and so on, they all came and modified and,
The violin.
and refined by Muslims
Yeah.
to Spain and so on.
And could you tell us some of the scriptural references, perhaps in
Yes,
the...
there are a lot of manuscripts of...
No, I mean, you know, in the Quran and perhaps the sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him,
yes.
that refer to this, how important it is to seek knowledge and to, you know,
Sure,
conduct
yeah.
science.
Let's, before we get that, Al-Biruni actually is a very interesting, great character. You know, he is... If he was alive today, he would be given 10 Nobel laureates, and that's not enough for him. If you put all the PhDs of the Muslim world today together and make a mountain, they wouldn't reach his height. This is an incredible, great guy. You know. He said once in his manuscript, he says, had it not been for Allah and for Rayhana, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did. So that means there was a woman involved.
Oh.
And therefore one has to try to identify the role of women in science and in Muslim heritage,
Who was
which is
Rayhana?
unfortunately neglected not only in the West but also by the Muslims in the East as well, and the Muslim world.
Who was the Rayhana he
Yeah,
was speaking about?
Now Rayhana is a lady who been involved in his work.
I see.
The other one is that he also mentioned, and as that when he wanted to compare the experimental results with his theoretical predictions of the circumference of the Earth, he found there was a problem between the two. So he said that he wanted to go and do the experiment again to finance this expedition. And he says, I couldn't find the finance because the waqf, the person, the philanthropist, the charitable person has died. So that means that kind of work as science research and technology research was funded by charity organizations in the Muslim world. Unfortunately now, charity organizations only focus very narrowly on the relief work or in building mosques.
Yeah.
Speaking about the sort of concept, the role of women and about charity, not many people know that the first university in the world in history was actually built by a Muslim lady in the city of Fez in Morocco. Her name was Fatima Al-Fihri, 23-year-old young person. Her sister built a mosque called Jami'. She built a Jami'a, which is the feminine word. The little ta at the end of a masculine word makes it feminine. Yep. She built this mosque in the year 851 in the city of Fez. Now, this university, she built this university, and then when you read a bit more about it, you find that this lady was a very religious lady, because she, from the first day of inauguration of this building, of this project, she fasted, and it took 13 years for this project to be completed. And she fasted every day for 13 years, and she broke her fast when the whole project was completed. Now that tells me that religious conviction among the Muslim world had some sort of an output which was quite useful in terms of education and research and so on. Now brings me to your question about anything in the Quran or saying the Prophet.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We shall save that for after the break.
Thank
so
you.
we'll find out about the religious references to science and knowledge right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Matters of Faith. Today our topic is the Muslim heritage in the world. And we're here in London to speak to Professor Al Hassani. And I was particularly interested, before the break, you told me about a very famous lady who started the first university in the Muslim world. In fact, the first university in the whole world. Was this a one-off, or were there more women involved in science and knowledge in the Islamic history?
Yeah, thanks very much for this opportunity. There are not many manuscripts that have been edited to show the role of many even male scientists. The problem is this: when you ask scholars like Professor Qasim al-Samurai in Leiden University, who is a paleographist, who they study manuscripts, he says that there are at least 5 million manuscripts in the world. And when I asked him how many of them are edited, he said there are only about 50,000 edited.
Wow.
Wow, you know, so there's an enormous amount of knowledge which has not been explored. And then if you go by this 50,000, most of this 50,000 is about theological arguments and, you know, about Muslim schools of thought. They're about political dynasties and about literature and so on. There's very few about science and so on. And that's the little bit that we discover, and we find out, oh, wow, you know, it's enormous. However, when you talk about women, it's even scarcer within this first 50,000. But recently, the Oxford Centre of Islamic Studies had a research fellow who have identified, this is Dr. Nadoui, identified 8,000 women scholars in the early years of Islam who were experts and teaching in the Quran and Sunnah and so on. Now to me, I thought, wow, if we have so many of them in the inner sanctum of theology, which at the moment the West is still cannot resolve, you know, the women in, you know, in priesthood or the Jewish religion. If the Muslims had 8,000 in the first few years of Islam, you know, then obviously it would be a lot. It is even more obvious that they must have dabbled with science and mathematics and so on, because I can't see there any difficulty there. Now this brings me to the point that those few manuscripts tell us that yes, there are. Give you an example. There was a great lady mathematician in Baghdad. Her name is Sutaita. And this Sutaita was expert witness in courts. So the judge would use her to calculate. You know, you have a problem between two people, a contractor who has not finished a building and wants to resolve this contract and so on. How do they do that? She would do mathematical analysis using various techniques like algebra and geometry and so on to calculate how much has been done from the building in terms of area and volume and material out of the whole total project which has been originally bidded. And then she would give this in Baghdad.
When was it?
This was about 900 years ago.
Wow.
So, you know, and this is Sutaita al-Ma'amli. Then another one, just for a typical example, a much younger one, who was in Aleppo, in Halab, in Syria. She, her name was Maryam al-Ijli, from the family of al-Ijli. She used to make astrolabes. Now, astrolabe is the most complicated piece of machine in her time. This is the equivalent of the GPS system that we have today. That machine would have various discs which you dial. When you put a pointer to a particular star in the sky, it will tell you where you are, gives you all sorts of information about sunrise, sunset, the direction where you have to go, and these discs, they are sort of like a computer program, except they are mechanical, very much like the CD-ROMs that we have today. You put in this program. The program there is engraved on the disc, and that program is the trajectories of the movements of the stars on that particular area that's been squashed flat instead of a spherical, hemispherical dome of the sky of that city is squashed, and then the movement of, so the tracing of the movement of these stars is a very complicated business.
Yeah.
And so though she used to make those, and so I would make her to, you know, be a lady, a mathematicians, engineering and metallurgists and so on, astronomer as well. There are quite a lot of ladies actually. In fact, even there are so many ladies of medicine, ladies of management and so on.
Now, just to sum up, where are you going to take the project in the future? What's your idea?
Well, we are very keen to produce educational resources, and we have enormous ambitions in creating virtual spaces in the internet, so that schools and teachers can go and visit and talk even to those past great characters.
Wow.
So we believe in a method we call edutainment, and you educate through entertainment.
Brilliant.
We are also commissioning professors to continue to investigate and write, because we have a production line. You have original research material that has to be academically peer-reviewed, properly investigated, so you don't end up conveying wrong message to the rest of the world. And then through a production line, you produce something for the media, for the schools, for the public, and so on.
And exhibitions are part of
Yes.
this
Now we
movement?
have a touring exhibition, of course, called 1001 Inventions exhibition. It's been touring in the UK, it's been into the major cities. It'll be in London Science Museum, but this one will be it's a global form. We have now increased its volume and higher quality than before.
It'll
And
come to the States
it will
as
be
well?
launched from London after 3 months. It will go hopefully to Washington DC, and it will tour the UK.
Wonderful.
Sorry, it will tour the US. There are other versions hopefully which will go to Europe and the Middle East as well. Wish us luck. And
Well,
pray
I
for
wish
us.
you God's blessings.
Yeah.
May this project go far
Thank
and
you.
wide,
Thank
and
you.
really it sounds very, very inspiring for everybody. The West, the East, ladies, gentlemen, this really is an inspiring project, and I really hope we will all be able to sample a little bit of it. So it's the Muslim heritage in all the world, 1001 Inventions. We can discover it online, in exhibitions, and in this wonderful book form. Well, thank you very much, Professor
You're welcome.
Hassani, to join us here
Yeah,
on Matters of Faith. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon again with another inspiring program. Bye-bye.